Hi, I'm Dan, and this is my Adventure Jam retrospective. I recently took part in Adventure Jam 2023, and I just wanted to say a few words about the whole experience, about my approach, what went well, and what could have gone better. This video will contain major spoilers for my game, The Alignment Paradox, so if you'd like to play the game spoiler-free, go and do that now. It'll only take about half an hour. Unless you get stuck on that one puzzle where everyone gets stuck, then come back and watch the rest of the video. Okay, so you've played the game, or you don't care about spoilers, so let's talk about Adventure Jam. So in case you don't know, Adventure Jam is an annual game jam in which you make an adventure game in 2 weeks, and then everyone plays and rates each other's games. If you've ever made a game or tried to make a game, you'll know that 2 weeks is not a lot of time to make a complete game. Especially if, like me, you have a full-time job, so you only really have 2 weekends and a handful of evenings to work on the game. So how do you make an adventure game in such a short space of time? Well, judging from the progress updates of the devs posted during the jam, it seems there are a lot of different approaches, but here's how I did it. I started with writing. According to the Adventure Jam rules, you can't start making the game until the jam begins. But you are allowed to write the story and the dialogue before the start of the jam if you want to get a head start on that. So about a week before the jam began, I started writing some very rough ideas for the story outline. My initial plan was to try and finish the writing before the start of the jam, but that didn't work out, so I spent the first few days writing story, dialogue and puzzles, and putting together a puzzle dependency chart to help figure out how the pieces of the game would all fit together. Once I was happy with the writing, or at least when I got to a point where I didn't completely hate it, I jumped into Unity and started building the game. I sketched out some very rough placeholder artwork for each room, and spent the rest of week 1 trying to make a first version of the game that was playable from start to finish. Now, I'm not a programmer. I have some very basic coding skills from playing around with PHP web development, but coding an entire game from scratch is way beyond my ability. Fortunately, smarter people than me have developed tools that make it possible to build an entire adventure game with almost no real programming knowledge. The tool I used is PowerQuest, a Unity tool made by Dave from PowerHoof. Dave uses PowerQuest to make his own adventure games, including several Adventure Jam winners, as well as the full-length game he's currently working on, The Drifter, which is probably my most anticipated adventure game since Return to Monkey Island. So PowerQuest really streamlines the process of making a point-and-click adventure game, with a nice interface within Unity where you can manage all your rooms, props, characters, etc. And then the magic happens in the Quest script editor, where you tell the game what should happen in each room using a very simple scripting language. When you get into puzzle logic, things get a bit more complex, but if you know how to write an if statement and you understand how variables work, you should be fine. Once the game was playable from start to finish, I did a final dialogue pass to make sure I was happy with that and sent the script off to the voice actors. At the beginning of week 2, I finally made a start on the artwork. I have a background in traditional art, mostly oil painting, but this was my first time doing pixel art. So it was a bit of a learning curve, and in hindsight, possibly not the best idea to jump into a new art style with only 1 week to go. But I like a challenge, and fortunately, I had a whole extra bank holiday to work on it thanks to this guy. So I bought Acebright, watched a few beginner tutorials, and got stuck in. Once I'd replaced all the placeholder art with the finished artwork, it started to feel like a real game. And from there it was a process of continuous testing, fixing and tweaking. The last few days I added music, sound effects and voiceover audio, as well as throwing together a title screen, credits and the itch.io page for the game, and then tweaking things obsessively until the deadline. So how did it go? Well, I'll start with what could have gone better so that I can end on a positive note. Firstly, the writing. I don't hate the story of the Alignment Paradox, and people who've played it seem to enjoy it overall. But if you analyse it too closely, it's full of plot holes and not as well rounded as I would have liked. That's mainly down to the time constraint, and I reached a point where I just had to accept the story as it stood, despite the plot holes, or I wouldn't have finished making the game at all. Someone commented on the game saying they don't really get why he was handcuffed, and the truth is I don't have a good explanation for that. I just thought it would make for a good puzzle. My initial idea was to have him use the axe to cut off his hand in the basement to get out of the handcuffs, but that would have been too early for the big reveal, and I couldn't just keep him in handcuffs for most of the game. Actually, now I think about it, I could have made Luna the main character and she just had to solve all the puzzles instead of Alex. Well, maybe next time. Anyway, I don't think it's too terrible, and people are generally very forgiving of plot holes in adventure games, especially for a game jam. Like I said, this was my first time doing pixel art, and I think it showed in some places. Again, I don't hate it, but if I had had more time, I would have liked to make it all look a bit nicer. I did spend some time after the jam polishing some of the artwork and adding some extra animations, so if you play the current version, you'll see those updates. One thing a lot of people mentioned in the comments was the audio levels. In certain parts of the game, the characters' voices were too quiet and got drowned out by the music. That's one of those things that I should have noticed, but I was too wrapped up finishing the game. Never got around to fixing it. Again, that has been fixed in the updated version, and I also added separate volume controls for the music, sound effects and dialogue. There's a part in the game where you're in a lab and you watch a security video on a computer just after you solve the super easy puzzle to get the password. And the video shows a recording of a previous event that happened in the basement where you started. So my initial idea was to just record a video of that scene, and then when you click on the video, just play the video recording. Simple. But for some reason I decided it would be a good idea to actually switch back to the basement and overlay the computer screen in the scene so it looks like you're still in the lab watching the video, but you're actually in the basement. Then have the cutscene play out in real time instead of using a video. In theory this is fine, but the problem is you can walk freely between the two rooms and several things can be in different states. So it ended up requiring quite a bit of logic to make sure the basement displayed in the correct state every time you entered. In fact, in the original version it wasn't set up right, and you can see that the grate should be closed here without any light on it, and the tarp should be in its original position. Anyway, it's all good experience, and I don't think anyone even noticed that, but that's something I would have done differently in hindsight. My original plan was to use AI for the voiceovers, which I had done before for the first game I made a few months ago.
Murray? Never mind, wrong game.
But I'm really glad I didn't, because I got to work with Rich Keeble and Naomi Miller, which was an absolute pleasure. I'd never worked with voice actors before, so I didn't really know what to expect, but Rich and Naomi were absolute pros and made the whole process completely stress-free. I had been warned to expect a long final night of chopping up and editing audio files, but they both sent me their audio well before the deadline, and they had even done the editing themselves and separated the audio into individual files, all correctly named and numbered. So all I had to do was drop them straight into Unity and everything just worked like magic. They even went above and beyond and recorded some extra lines for the updated version. So if you're looking for voice actors for your game, I can highly recommend Rich and Naomi. Links in the description. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the game's puzzles. It can be challenging to find the right balance of difficulty for puzzles. If they're too easy, it can make the game boring, and if they're too hard, it can just be really frustrating to the point where you might just end up rage quitting. I think most of my puzzles were pretty fair and logical, but there was that one puzzle that stumped a lot of people, finding the password for the computer. I have added a couple of very minor hints in the update to hopefully provide some very subtle signposting. But I did hear from a few people that despite getting stuck there for a while, once they figured it out, it was one of the most satisfying puzzles in the game. So I didn't want to spoil that by making it too obvious. If you have played it, let me know what you think. In the end, I think the good must have outweighed the bad, because somehow my game finished in 3rd place overall out of 332 entries. I still find that pretty hard to believe, to be honest. This was my first Adventure Jam, and only the 3rd game I've ever made, so to finish 3rd is really amazing to me, especially considering the really high quality of so many of the entries. Thank you so much to everyone who rated my game, and everyone who played, streamed and commented. It's been really great to see people enjoying a game I made. Big thanks to Dave from Powerhoof and the other PowerQuesters. I spent a lot of time in the PowerQuest Discord during the jam. It was really fun hanging out with those guys. How do you end these things? Like and subscribe, I guess, and I'll see you in the next video.